Hi, Mivracha, to life and for blessings. Ah, what? What is the closest thing you have? What's the closest thing that you have? Anybody? Any thoughts on that? Nachum Hillel? What's the closest thing you have to you? Uh-huh. It's your life. Can you be a little more specific?
That's who I am.
Closest thing we have to us is our neshama, right? Because that's your life. That's, although probably in naturally we feel the closest thing we have to us is our physical life because we feel our materiality.
You know,
We don't,
so shower.
right. I mean, we don't, I mean, no, 1 second. We don't feel it not with touch, not with taste, right? You know, the story of back in communist Russia, teacher gets up in front of the class and she says, children, can you see God? I said, no. Can you hear God? No. Can you taste God? No. Can you smell God? No. So she said, well, I guess there's no God. Pretty good conclusion, right? So little Yankele from the back of the school, the classroom rather, he says, puts up his hands, teacher, if I may, children, does anybody smell the teacher's brains? No. Anybody taste them? Anybody hear them? Or anybody see her brains? I guess the teacher has no brains. It's cute, but it tells us something, right? That naturally we're driven by our five senses, and that's what's real for us.
Right.
So the physical reality of us, right? I just did a couple of funerals, and there was a physical reality of a person. But that wasn't the reality of who they were. Who's the reality of who we are is our soul. Right? Then it comes home, right? Then we see it with our eyes that the physicality of me is not me because that's all that's left, right? That rots and decays eventually. So it's not the real me, but my neshama is the closest thing to me. That takes a little effort. I mean, we understand that intellectually. And when we daven, when we are sense real connection, Fabringen, like we have on Shabbos over here, then we sense neshama. Then we feel sense of soul, right? When we learn, then we sense that there's something greater. We have a sense of it. We don't have five senses of it, all right? Maybe we do. I shouldn't say we see. Seeing doesn't mean seeing something physical. You see it in the mind's eye rather than the physical eye, neshama.
But can you also say the fact that the three garments is all the action of the speech that they represent our awareness of the shadow?
Well, that gives us, yeah, I think you're right. That gives us sort of an insight to the fact of, right. But,
Because we are rebel of thoughts, we are rebel
right.
of actions, and things we say.
And the fact that we have consciousness, right, is of course, that's the story with little Yankel who gets up and sees, anybody see the teacher's brains? I once told this to a guy, so, well, take a bat, break open her head, and then you'll see her brains. So, Chacham, you'll see brains. You're going to see flesh. You don't see flesh. Why is that flesh any different than the flesh of your hand? It's only flesh. Obviously, there's something metaphysical there that's not flesh of the hand that doesn't have awareness. So obviously, there's something there. We call that soul. Welcome to Tanya Today. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine. Come to you for Chabad Zich and Kadesh in Montreal, Canada, where it's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. We begin today a new direction, a new direction, a new direction. What's the direction? Till now, we were learning about being upright, meaning upright means your head's on top. Your head, what you know, brings to your heart, or at least an intellectual love will bring to your heart of God. The more you know, the more you're aware, the more you can connect to it, the more it'll bring to your heart. And ultimately, it means to bring to your action that you do for God, right? You do a mitzvah, you do whatever it is to connect to God. And that's what we learned. That's a long path because there's a lot to become aware of your relationship to God, the value of God's mitzvahs, what God's purpose is, and all of that. That it should come into your heart to at least an intellectual love, and then brings you to act for God. That's a lengthy path, but short in the end because you own it. Now we begin chapter 18. A new path that's going to be a short path to who you really are. It's short, as we just spoke, the soul, the divine soul. But at the same time, it's going to be a long path. After short, it's still long. We'll explain that a little more later. Okay, so the Alter Rebbe begins chapter 18 by saying we need to explain. Remember that one verse in Deuteronomy, in Dvarim, that is the basis of 53 chapters, that this thing is very close. Now, till now, we explained how it's close, but now it's very close. How could it be very close? Intellectual love of God. That's not very close. That means you have to learn a lot to know a lot about God, your relationship with God, God's relationship to the world, God, how he's beyond the world. That's a lot to know about God, to have a relationship with him. And that relationship should not be just intellectual, but it should feed your heart enough that it brings you to do for God, to do his mitzvahs. Well, not all of us have a mind. Actually, I don't know if any of us do, to be frank. Have the mind and the heart that's suited, that our meditation should develop anything that's going to be real in our hearts. Again, even intellectual love is something, right? It means you have to meditate to bring something to your heart, that there's some kind of glimmer there. We don't all have that capability, especially in our generation. That is a very, what we call a Dor Yosem, is an orphan generation. We're orphaned. We ain't got a mind. Parenthetically, I was just going to say this. Used to be, when I was a kid, commercials were a minute long. Then they became 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and now you can get a blimp of 5 seconds or even less. Now, the artificial reason is because it costs a lot of money, right? Costs a lot of money. The real reason is we used to have a concentration for a whole minute on something. Not any longer. Not a whole minute. So in the times the Alter Rebbe Chassidim, they could concentrate on an idea for an hour, 4 hours, 5 hours at a time. Imagine.
They have no distractions.
Can we do that for 5 minutes to be concentrate on something in your mind? Meditate. I'm not talking about reading. Reading something you could read for a long time because the focus of reading allows you to read. But I'm talking about nothing in your mind. Close your eyes and for 5 minutes, right? To meditate. You know how hard that is? We're an orphan generation. Alter Rebbe's Chassidim, they could do it for 5 hours. Okay, don't worry about it. Because that's what we're going to learn now. So, yet this tells us over here that this is very near to us. So what is it very near to us if we can't do it in the upright way that the mind feeds the heart, that we have mind having dominion over the heart, right? And that mode of service, by the way, not to say that we have to discard that. We have to still implement it and we'll deal with it later. But now we're on a new path. The short way. What's short? Well, what's short? And actually, in this way, by the way, the love is going to be even more sincere than the love is of an intellectual love. And that is because we have an Abba Miseteris, we have a hidden love in our hearts. It is based on our soul that was given to us. How do we get it? It was an inheritance from the patriarchs. And we only need to arouse that hidden love that's there already, that was given to us from the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, given to us. Wow. Okay, but before we understand that, we have to preface the following. We need to understand the following. What is the root source of this love? Love usually comes, the former kind of love. How did it come? Anybody? How did it come, the former kind of love? From what we spoke until chapter 17. It came from your understanding. It came from Bina, right? When you understand about God, your relationship to God, right? That developed a feeling in your heart. Ema banim smecha. From Bina comes to the heart, right? Understanding heart. Intellectual love is based on Bina. That's brought through Das, of course, but it's Bina, right? What's the root source of this love? It's a different kind, as we will see. Furthermore, we need to understand what's the nature of this love? What's the nature of the love that we had before, that we learned before? The nature of that love is, I want to bond. I want to bond with my beloved because I understand the greatness of my beloved. I appreciate the greatness of my beloved. So I want to bond. Just like if you think about someone in your life that you love and you think about loving things about them and understand how great they are, what do you want to do? You want to connect with them. That's the type of love that we had previously. This kind of love is different, as we will see. It's not the same nature of love. It's a different kind of nature of love. Furthermore, we need to understand what does it mean it's an inheritance? How do you inherit love? I don't say I love coffee, but I do love bittersweet chocolate. I've spoken about that. Bittersweet chocolate on my palate, I like that. I love that. I like it, right? If I like it, doesn't mean my kids are going to like it, because you don't inherit love. Because I love Tanya doesn't mean that my children will love Tanya. They might love something else, right? Love is not an inheritance. So what does this mean over here? How do we understand that? And the fourth question is, how does love include the awe of God, the fear of God? How is it incorporated? In what manner? All right. So the matter is as follows. Those are the 4 questions, right? And it's not even Passover, and we're asking 4 questions. Look at that. Well, because this week is the Passover week, right? We're going out of Egypt. And today's learning was about the Pesach offering, right? All right. So the explanation is follows: the patriarchs, they are truly a chariot to God. What does it mean, a chariot? A chariot has no will of its own. It's driven by its rider. The patriarchs had no will of their own. They're totally driven by God, directly, solely by its rider, by God. Because of that, they merit the privilege of drawing down to their descendants, a nefesh, ruach, and neshama, that the 10 holy spheres of all the worlds, that they give to their descendants, Jewish people, this unique Jewish soul. What does that mean? It means as follows. Whether you're the most unworthiest Jew, sinful Jew, doesn't matter, or that your soul comes from the lowest level of the divine order of things. What's the lowest level of divine order of things? The world of Asiya. There's 4 worlds, and souls can come from anywhere of those 4 worlds. The higher the soul is, the more lofty the soul, right? Higher world. And how about a soul that comes from the world of Asiya, the world of action, the spiritual world of action? It's the lowest. And in that world, from the lowest divine attribute, Malchus. Malchus of Asiya. Oh, okay. That's pretty low soul. Which, by the way, low doesn't mean bad, by the way. It just means they have a different function, which we're not going to get into now, right? But yet, it's a lowly soul, right? Nonetheless, in that Malchus of Asiya is found the Chochmah of Asiya, the divine wisdom of this in that world. And in the divine wisdom of that world, of the soul, in the soul, is all the way to Chochmah of Malchus of Atzilus. A Chochmah of Atzilus, Chochmah in the world of emanation, it's not a creation anymore, where this soul comes from, eventually devolves from, right? You know what Chachma? Chachma is the vehicle, is the container. But you know what? Or Ein Sof. It's the actual light of the divine, infinite God. So what it means is that the infinite of God is garbed in all of these levels as it devolves, but it doesn't lose and isn't diluted. It's covered up, but it's not diluted. It's there in its entirety. And this is then the root source of the Jewish soul. So what we've learned here, and we will elaborate, but what we learned now is about what does it mean that the patriarchs, they inherit to us? They don't inherit. They are privileged that their descendants get this soul. Who gives the soul, though? God. God gives the soul. They're not giving so inheritance doesn't mean that they're giving the soul. They just merited because of their greatness that they were a Merkava, a chariot to God, so totally devoted to God that their descendants, Jewish people, will get this soul. Right? What does it mean, a non-Jewish soul? We're not going to go into it because that's not where this is going. Comes. Anyways, this is not the point over here.
So then the people themselves have the soul as well.
Yes and no. Yes and no.
So we managed to get something that they weren't able to.
Yeah, on a certain level, that yeah, not really, because it was only given at Mount Sinai, right? It was only given at Mount Sinai, really. This soul, they have a sampling of it, but not really it, and that's why back then, being Jewish was not based fully on soul. It was based on commitment. It was based on commitment. It was based on your affiliation and commitment. So if you were not affiliated or committed, you weren't part of the Jewish people back then. Now it's not at all that way. That's the point over here. They merit that their descendants have it. They don't have it fully, right? And it means, therefore, the lowest of the low, someone who's a sinful individual, right? sinful individuals means the way you act, not who you are, because who you are in your soul, right, is defined by that God gave that. So he gave you a soul, even though it came maybe devolved and it's on a level of Malchus, the lowest of the 10 divine attributes of the world of Asiya. So it's it has a different form of function that we would call lower function, right? Which we will explain, but not now. Lower function, as opposed to a higher function. But we need all functions to make one. It's like a body, right? Your body, does it need a brain? Yes. Does it need a heart? Yes. Does it need a spleen? Yes. Does it need your toenail? Also needs your toenail to be fully functioning, right? To be fully functioning, you need a toenail too, right? You're lacking something if you don't have a toenail. Same thing as Jewish people. They perform different functions as part of a whole of the Jewish people, and all of it is needed. This is actually chapter 2 that we learned this idea, by the way, right? With the fetus being developed from one essential whole of, right, of Chachma, the seed of the father, that the mother now, 9 months of gestation, is even developing from that seed, the different functionalities of the body. So but the bottom line and what we're learning over here, what the important point over here is that in fact, right, it's all rooted in the same Chachma above, which we're going to go into more about that Chachma, what that means, and the uniqueness of the soul, that it comes from Chachma, as opposed to, by the way, non-Jewish souls coming from Bina. But we're not going to do that today. We're going to do that tomorrow. So appreciate that idea. It's a powerful idea. But then again, we have two things here, that we know the root source, Chachma. We don't understand what that means exactly, right? More we'll have an understanding of where it comes from. We now understand the concept of inheritance. Inheritance means that just they merit, right, for their descendants. And we still need to understand, which will be in chapters 19, we need to understand, what does it mean? What's the nature of this love, right? Love, there's two qualities of nature of love. One that we've learned from chapter 9 to 17, as we explained. And this is a different nature of love. All right. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts? Very powerful.
Just like the patriarchs knew Hashem as Skel Shaddai. But
Shmi Hashem lo nedaiti lehem, but my name Hashem, I did, yeah. Maybe it's probably there's probably some connection there, for sure. So when does the soul reside? Where in the body? So the divine soul is in the brain. The animal soul is in the left ventricle of the heart. That's right. Now, remember that the animal soul is what gives vitality to the body, right? It's the source of vitality to the body. The divine soul is in the brain and in the right, and reveals itself in the right ventricle of the heart. Of course, it doesn't mean physically. It means metaphysically, right? Not physically. So, because you get a blood transfusion, you don't get a different animal soul. Right? Why don't atheists feel this love and arousal in their soul? Why don't? Because as we're going to learn about this, a good question, that this part of the soul is in exile. And, it's there, but you have to tease it out, so to speak, if you will. You have to, connect with it. It's not just, there, and otherwise, we're not angels, that the angels naturally feel their connection to the divine, to God. right? We've got to make the connection,
An atheist can deny he has a soul.
right? Yeah, so much so. Exactly. What do atheists say? Thank you. I remember once here, what's the sum total of a person? 23 cents. Because if you take all of the body and you melt it down, so to speak, right? So the value of the water and right, and sell all the parts, the value of the water and of the minerals, and so you get 23 cents for it.
Right.
So that's the value of a person. Can you imagine? Huh?
Doesn't cost anything.
Okay, so the minerals I get,
Right
yeah.
away, 85% or something. The water, so that costs.
So yeah, for the few minerals
Yeah,
that
you
they
have a little
well,
water and a little
exactly.
copper or,
Yeah. Well, today probably we've ingested a lot of plastic, so we might be worth a little more. Yeah. Funny and sad, right? Sad that a person that the truth is, by the way, I don't, I've said this before and I'll say it again. I don't believe that there's anything called an atheist or an agnostic. They might say it, but they don't really believe it. What do you mean? If you, for me, this is from my, if a person had a bad day, right, and they're an atheist, then shouldn't life continue being, tomorrow's also going to be a bad day. Why does a person have a sense of hope? Where's that come from? Like, that's ridiculous.
People have a sense of hope. Some people have a sense of hopelessness.
Right. No, but what I'm saying, when someone does have a sense of hope, why should they have a sense of hope when today was a lousy day? Why shouldn't it just continue tomorrow to be also a lousy day? Like, where's that come from? It comes because you have a soul that's a part of God, and God is all good, and therefore the soul intuitively seeks goodness. So here's your soul talking. You say you're an atheist, but your soul is talking and telling you, tomorrow will be a better day. Furthermore, that's what one for me evidence. Another evidence would be huh? I know, that's why I said there's no atheist. So I said there's no real
Your
atheist.
example is not a real atheist.
No, because every atheist has a sense of hope.
There's an idea that people have a sense of hopelessness. They just go through the motions of life and they have a sense of hopelessness, not a sense of hope. Because yesterday was a bad day, they expect today to be even a worse day.
Right.
So I mean, your atheist is not a real atheist.
But even that,
you describe, that's not a real.
So I'll describe further. Then you have a person. Why would it be that when you see, a child that, God forbid, got leukemia, God forbid, right? And you feel a sense of injustice. Like, it's not fair, right? And you're an atheist. What do you mean it's not fair? That's where the cookie crumbles, right? You got a bad set of genes. And this is what happens when you get a bad set of genes. But why should there be why do you have a sense of injustice intuitively? You may come to and recognize, yeah, that's where the cookie crumbles, and got a bad set of genes. But intuitively, most people do not feel that way. Intuitively, they feel, right, instinctually, that Nebuch, we feel bad, we feel terrible, and we feel there's a sense of injustice here. That's only because you have a soul that is part of God, that is, as God is all good, so therefore the soul is a soul, and therefore we intuitively feel good people deserve good things, and bad people deserve, bad things. Anyways, that's also not a real atheist. I agree. There's no real atheist. All believers. All right, folks.